Hello, welcome to another episode of Tiny Nest. I'm Kiva.
And I'm Jake. This series is following our tiny house project from the early stages through to completion and beyond.
This episode shows how we made our custom rigid awning to go over our door.
So we had a concept in mind, but we weren't really sure what it was going to look like. So we just slapped it into the SketchUp model here. And we think it's going to look alright. And we made a material list of what we're going to need to make this work. We're going to support it with some pieces of angle iron and just paint them white to match the whole trim kind of look. And we'll just have to put it together before we're going to know if we need extra support to keep it strong. If it is too flexy, we might add more, but if this is rigid enough, we're just going to go ahead with that.
Even though we carefully sealed the door, we wanted something to keep it under cover even when swung all the way open.
The features of this design are that the entire thing is held to the house with 4 bolts that thread into provisions that we're going to create inside the framing. There's no permanent mounting hardware on the exterior, so the entire thing can be removed and all there'll be left are 4 little holes. And using hinges to connect at the top allows us to use weather stripping to seal against the house. The strip will be compressed when the awning is swung up into its final position.
First, we prepared all the material. The end pieces are just 2x2s that we ran along the table saw at a depth of 1 inch, making 2 slits that don't run all the way to the end on one end of the pieces. Then we chiseled out the material between the slits, making a hard edge at the end where the slits stop short.
Then we dry fit all the siding boards together and slid the end pieces on to make sure everything was going to fit nicely. Once confident with the fit, we sanded the pieces down to clean them up.
We also cut a 15-degree angle at the back of the rearmost piece, where it will seal with the weather stripping.
To finish off these end pieces, we just dry fit all the boards together, squished them together to make sure there's no gaps, and marked the length that needed to be, and then cut that and sanded all the corners everywhere. We also trimmed the faces down so that there's sort of an equal amount of it showing all the way around. And now it's ready to go for staining these and priming and painting these and getting it ready to do the final assembly.
We made use of 2 of the hinges from our original door. They're stainless steel, so they'll do well outside. Stainless steel is not the easiest thing to drill through, but we just needed to enlarge 1 hole on each hinge to accept a 1/2-inch bolt.
We cleaned off any residue from the angle iron and filed down the sharper edges. After spray painting them, we drilled holes in the ends and then made sure to spray the metal that we exposed.
We also sprayed the heads and faces of the rest of the hardware that would be used. Once we'd confirmed the position of the awning, we drilled and prepared the first bolt hole. We found it's a really good idea to work progressively with things that need to line up really precisely. And what I mean by that is, rather than measuring the distance between where the bolt holes need to be, laying it out and then drilling them, we've got 1 hole already drilled and ready to go. And we're just going to pass the bolt through and get that actually sort of secured, and then use the other hinge as a template and make the other mark. And that way we know for absolute sure that they're going to line up. If we just laid them out with measuring tape and they ended up being like even a 1/16 of an inch off, the bolt might not go in nicely and we'd have a big hassle to deal with, maybe having to enlarge the hole or something. And we're being really careful both to not mess up the siding that we just finished, and also of course to make this a nice finished product. Alright, I got my mark here and I poked a tiny little hole with a small drill bit just to use as a guide for the bigger bit. I'm using a 5/8 bit, which is slightly bigger than the 1/2-inch bolts we're using, just to give us a tiny bit of play. And I'm going to go through the siding and then through the sheathing as well. This goes against like every fiber of my being to drill through this nice siding that we just finished. carrying on with a sort of progressive method, we're looking at the hole from the inside now, and I started by just taking a 2x4 and holding it sort of centered over the hole to make some marks so that once it's covered I know where to position it to get it centered. And I've got my piece of blocking cut so that it's going to fit inside the stud space here, and I'm just going to tap it in. Okay, so that so that looks close enough, and I'm just going to put a couple screws in just so that it doesn't move. Okay, now I'm going to go outside, poke the drill through the hole that I've already drilled, and get a hole started in the block. And then I can use that as a starting point to do the hole that's going to go all the way through the block. So I've got my hole started. I know that once I've finished with this piece and come back to install it, that it's going to line up perfectly with that hole. So we'll go to the next step. Okay, now I'm going to drill the hole all the way through, being really careful to keep it as straight as possible. So this 1/2 inch coupling is what I'm going to sink into the wood, and it's quite a bit bigger than the 5/8 hole that I've already got. So I'm going to widen the hole to 3/4, which is still a little bit smaller than this, which is what we want. You'll see when I drive it in, there's going to be lots of friction, and that's going to keep it from turning. And I also don't want to widen the hole too far down. I only want to go about as far as this is going to sink in. Also, I flipped this over, it's the back side, and I'll show you how the depths all line up. But we want the coupling to be on the innermost side of the house's framing.
You should be wearing glasses.
I'm gonna put on glasses for this grinding. You're going to too. Okay, so for depth, let's say that this is the front, like where the sheathing is, and then the siding. The bolt's gonna be coming in from outside, and in order for it to tighten up against the hinge and press it up against the siding, it's gonna need to come basically full depth all the way to here. And you can see that if I sank this coupling down all the way, that the bolt wouldn't be able to go that far because it would bottom out against the shaft here. It could only go to here. And that's actually just because we made a bit of a mistake on the lengths. We need bolts of this length for the bottom supports because there's a block that stands it further off of the siding. And we just bought 4 bolts of the same length, but we should have got 2 of that and then 2 shorter ones for here. But rather than going out and getting more bolts, I'm just gonna grind these couplings about an inch, or sorry, 1/2 inch off. So it'll sit more like there. And then when this comes in, you can see that it won't bottom out against the coupling. Pro tip, if you're grinding something or cutting something metal, if you've created lots of friction in any way, always check to see how hot it is before you grab it, because it's usually really hot. Okay, so now that I've got my ground down piece, you can see that I'd be able to thread the bolt all the way in without it bottoming out. If it went any further, it would be basically inside the house. So I'm ready to pound it in, and I'm gonna use my sharp edges here that I've created to make a bit of a indent on the wood. I'll line this up, just press it in, and then I'm gonna just take, this is just a Sawzall blade, and I'm gonna just take a tiny bit of material out on each of those corners just to help it get started. Okay, so this is an added step that I'm adding from a lesson learned on doing the first one, which is I'm gonna pass the bolt through, get it engaged, and then pound this in with the bolt engaged. And the reason for that is on the first one, I pounded just the coupling straight in and didn't account for the fact that an imperfection could get it sent off at a bit of an angle, which it did, and then I had trouble getting the thread engaged because it wasn't meeting up straight on. And so this goes with that kind of progressive method again. This bolt is in now, so when I pound this down, I know the bolt's gonna fit in because it's in there while I'm doing it.
nice. So you can see that the coupling is sunk in there and it's really tight. That's not going to turn in there. And the bolt is, it's not perfectly centered, but it's close enough. It's turning perfectly smoothly. It's not wedged against the side. And so we'll take it in there and do one final test fit to make sure that the bolt's going to go all the way through the hole that we made in the house, through this hole, and be able to engage nicely into the threads of the coupling. So we're going to put the piece back into position, but of course before we screw it down, we're going to go with the same kind of method that we've been doing. We're going to go outside, get the bolt engaged through the piece, get like pretty much everything in its final position, and then we'll come back in and screw it down so we know that it's exactly where it needs to be. And now that we got the bolt in place, I'm just going to fire some screws in to fasten us down. So because we drilled a hole straight through here, and we've got a gap between the siding and the house, like where the house wrap is, if, say, moisture were to get against the house wrap and trickle down, it could just go straight into that hole. So this is kind of the same way that we put some caulking into where the holes are for the hardware on the door. I'm going to try to get a little bit of caulking in around to do my best to seal that, so that if moisture were trickling down, it would hit the caulking and go around. Like I'm trying to seal, basically create a gasket between the siding and the house wrap. So obviously it's a really small hole, so I'm just going to try to get it around the perimeter as best I can here. And then, this is gonna make me feel really dirty, but the caulking will stick to your skin, but if you get some spit on it, it won't. The caulking will stick to your skin, but if you get saliva on it, it'll create a barrier where you can push on it and mold it, and it won't stick to you and rip away as soon as you pull your finger off of it. I basically just squeezed the donut of caulking in there and then used my finger to push it into the gap between the siding and the house wrap. And it looks like I got a pretty good seal around. And of course I cleaned out excess to make sure that there's nothing preventing the bolt from sliding cleanly through the hole. And just as we've done every time we've cut, or in this case drilled, into the siding, exposing some fresh wood, we've dabbed a little bit of stain in there to make sure that it's as protected as it can be.
On assembly day, I had some extra help. Thanks Brent and Robin for your assistance. We put glue into all of the grooves to help hold the boards together. When putting the end pieces on, the guys pushed the boards together to close up the tongue and groove fittings tightly, and then I put screws through the end pieces into the boards to hold them like that. This is all that's holding the sheet together, but it was more than enough to keep it solid. And there's screws on both sides. Next I reattached the hinges into the positions that I knew were correct, and then added some weather stripping to help block off the holes and cushion them against the house. Next came the main sealing strip, which is much thicker. The adhesive wasn't enough to hold it down, so we had to use some staples, but it's so thick and puffy that the staples won't affect its ability to seal. Then it was time to mount this unwieldy object. The natural bow of the sheet was such that it was pulling the hinges a bit out of alignment, so after some hilarious ladder shuffling and fiddling around, we managed to get the right kind of pressure against it to line the holes back up and get everything secured down.
Does it feel like it's rubbing on anything?
Good. It'll come to rest on the bolt at some point.
Oh, that's perfect, because then it won't hit the door.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Phase 1. Complete.
So continuing with our sort of progressive method here, we've got the whole sheet up and affixed, and now we're building the sort of support contraptions on both sides. Then we'll use them to actually lift it up and play with it until it's in a position that we're happy with, and then we can just make a mark right through the holes to get that really precise position for where we're going to drill for the bolt. Let's hold it up a little bit and see what happens.
Get the height.
I think it's supposed to go a tiny bit higher. Can you go higher, or is it kind of, do you feel it?
Well, I can see it
maxing out?
compressing, but it's not like maxed.
Are you,
Right
is
there.
the angle of the cut? Yeah, you could go a little bit higher probably.
It's like,
Does that feel good?
I got it like centered roughly on the thing.
We don't want it on the seam though.
No, I know.
Can you get to the next one, or is that too high?
Oh, maybe. Ready?
Yeah. Does that feel like there's some kind of crazy tension or something? Or does that
No,
feel
not
good?
that much. Just like,
Does that feel good?
yeah.
We didn't get any footage of these bolts going in, but we got them through the house and secured them the same way that we put the bolts through at the top of the awning through the hinges. And just like with the hinges, we put a bit of weather stripping on the back of these so that it's a bit of a cushion up against the siding of the house. And these things here are just a cut down piece of 2x4 that we've primed and painted so that to protect from the elements. Once everything was secured down, we went over everything with some paint just to make sure that nothing was exposed. The weather stripping has done a good job of sealing this edge, and as you can see, the angled cut of the back piece has made it so that there's an even compression along the weather stripping.
The day after we got it all installed, I tried sealing the seams from the top, and here's a quick clip of that.
So it turns out that I was focusing so much on the design and how I was going to get this contraption to work that I completely forgot about the orientation of the tongue and groove. So I've actually got the tongues pointing down, which looks good for the finished edge on the front here, but it's not good for the water running along the top of it because all the grooves are facing up like a bucket and could basically collect water. So I'm going to go and caulk all the seams, the side-to-side seams, and then also, of course, the seam where these pieces of siding meet the end trim pieces.
I wasn't able to get it done that day because it was a bit damp, and when it rained after that, we did actually get water coming through the seams on the underside. But since then, I've been able to get it all totally sealed up, and it's working really well now. There's no water coming through the boards anymore, or through where the weather stripping is, or anything. It's working really well.
We've had the awning up for over a month now, and it's been subject to some pretty strong winds, so we're pretty confident that it's pretty strong and sturdy. And we also have this piece of foam just on the awning that's acting as a temporary soft doorstop for our door. And we'll figure something out that will look a bit nicer and be more permanent. If you want to see some of our previous videos, click on the preview tiles, and subscribe if you want to follow our progress. You can also visit our website here.